Welcome to Catalyst, a program about people, ideas, issues, and conversations around them.
Welcome to Catalyst. I'm Doug Webster, your host of the STEM education series, A Renewed Culture of Innovation. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. This series was developed to discuss key issues around stimulating interest in technology, creativity, and innovation, and to help strengthen science, engineering, and technology education. Today's episode is Bring Back the Masons, Ancient Technology in the New World. My guest is Damon Eyre, who spent the last decade in Lincoln, England, where he studied the art and trade of stone masonry. Damon also worked 8 years restoring the Lincoln Cathedral. He came back to the United States to help promote stone masonry, including the use of limestone in modern construction and strengthening masonry education and training. Welcome to the show, Damon.
Thank you.
So, can you explain to us what is masonry? What are we talking about there?
Well, around Europe, it's defined as traditional cutting of stone for use in architectural purposes, which divides it into three categories, really. There's architectural details, so all the moldings and archstones, the voussoirs that make up a building that you see, letter cutting, which can be used on memorials and plaques, and obviously carving, which would be the more detailed elements that don't tend to follow the same kind of template or form that the masonry would follow.
Okay. Now, when it comes to masonry, what is your mission?
What's my mission? I would love to teach Americans how to do this in a traditional manner again. There are plenty of companies in the US that are doing lots of masonry work and cutting lots of great stone, but there isn't the continuous tradition of traditional training in this country where people learn the ancient practices and the ancient methods of how to use hand tools in order to produce these moldings. If you want to learn that, you have to go to Europe. And this happens quite frequently, European companies are brought in to do a lot of work. What people can do is phenomenal. I mean, what people are doing is phenomenal. You only have to go to some of the larger cities and see some of the other things that are built to know that people are still doing this work, but it doesn't have that kind of continuous tradition here that it does in Europe.
Now, who else in the United States shares that mission?
There are people scattered about. There are certainly a lot of people that have come and moved to this country from Europe and set up their own businesses here and are doing it. There are lots of American companies that are doing it. And the problem is that as with all traditional crafts in this country, there's lots of interested, dedicated, talented people that are scattered across this country. And it's so large, of course, that they don't have the ways to connect in the way that they do in much smaller countries such as England. And I don't think as well that they have behind them a knowledge base and an understanding from the public that will appreciate what they're doing, being willing to pay for what they're doing, and when they're offered something that, say, is cast concrete at a fraction of the price, then they're willing to put that kind of thing into a building because they don't have an appreciation for what was done, what could be done, and what should be done for the long-term care of their buildings.
No. And you mentioned Europe. Now, why is masonry still widely used in Europe?
That's a good question. I suppose because there's always been the tradition of it, I think. Certainly if you go to places like France and Germany, they have very strong guilds that have existed since the Middle Ages, and they're continuing to operate today. And that structure has never disappeared. England has suffered a little bit from similar problems to the US in that as modern construction came in, some of the traditional crafts were devalued to some extent. But I think it's also been maintained there because they have such a rich history of using traditional materials, which means that there's always been people that are needed to produce new replacement parts for all of those buildings. America, America has a shorter history, which means that the time period is actually now when we're starting to need wholesale replacement of these traditional elements. Until now, we could get away with simply patching them up. But now a lot of these buildings that are 250, 300 years old, even 150, are starting to need wholesale replacement in a way that has been happening in Europe for a long time.
Now, what materials would you use?
I mean, for me as a stonemason, the skills that we have that I have are transferable to any stone material, but generally building stones are limestone or sandstone. Obviously, if you look around Vermont, you can see lots of buildings built with other materials. Granite can be used, but it's so hard that it makes it hard. Well, it makes it quite difficult to work it, but it also makes it harder to do more detailed moldings where you can get away with a softer limestone or a sandstone. So.
Now, the title of the show is Renewed Culture of Innovation. Can you give us a sense of what some new applications are for limestone and
well,
masonry?
The new applications, I suppose one of the things is that by rediscovering some of the traditional methods, we can rediscover some of the traditional ways of building. The more you start using machinery to work stone, you start to be forced to have moldings and detailing that follows what the machines can produce. If you know how to work it by hand, you can produce virtually anything, which is why you get some amazing and wonderful buildings across Europe. The other thing that goes with this is the use of traditional hydraulic lime mortars rather than cement mortars. A lime mortar and a cement mortar are very much related if you imagine a spectrum with what's called a fat lime or a non-hydraulic lime at one end and a cement or a Roman cement, an eminently hydraulic lime at the other. They're both produced in similar manners by burning limestone, but depending upon the constituent elements in the original burning process, it produces a mortar material that has varying degrees of flexibility, water permeability, and they behave very differently in a structure. So by trying to bring back the use of traditional lime, we can start to build in different ways that allow for buildings to be maintained for a much longer period. They have more environmental sustainability factors, and it's a wonderful material to work with.
As far as resources here in Vermont or in the United States, what do we have for resources?
For stone, we've got amazing amounts of resources. I mean, Indiana limestone is some of the biggest fields and beds of wonderful limestone in the world. There are loads of other stones around the country that can be used, both sandstone and limestones. There are already some very large producers of burned lime for lots of different practices, for the medical profession, for food, for the steel industry. They all use burned lime. But none of the American producers, for instance, right now are actually producing a hydraulic lime for restoration, building purposes. So people have to import from Europe. There is one producer in Virginia, Virginia Lime Works, who is producing very good limes for use in building, but they mainly produce for their own use rather than being able to market it as a lime for anyone to use.
Oh, great. Great. Now, what are the environmental advantages of using limestone?
Well, to burn limestone to produce cement, you have to input energy as you do for making lime, but you have to burn cement at about 1200 degrees centigrade, whereas lime can burn at about 900 degrees or 900 to 1000 degrees. So it starts with less energy needed to produce it at the outset. As lime, over the first couple of years of its life, lime will cure slowly. And as it does, it reabsorbs carbon dioxide from the environment, from the air. So it is not carbon neutral by any means. You are still, in order to use it, you are producing carbon dioxide. However, because of its reabsorption rate and how much less you have to put into it from the beginning, it is a much greener material than cement.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great. Now, can you name a few differences between, contrast between concrete and limestone? Some of the key differences, such as the speed, cost, quality, character. I mean, there's all kinds of variables there.
There are a lot of variables, and I suppose that one of the reasons cement is so widely used is that in order to build with it, it's much faster, much quicker, much easier. It's a far more versatile material in that sense, but its long-term use, as we all know, I mean, buildings today are put up with a lifespan of 30 or 40, 50 years, and then they're taken down. people have all seen things like concrete cancer and the problems that happen with large pieces of concrete that have steel inside and iron. If they crack, that iron will rust and the concrete splits because of the rusting. So there's a limited lifespan of that material. If you were to build a building out of limestone and lime mortar, it means that over time, if small elements of it fail, you can remove them, you can replace them, and the building can last for a long time. I mean, I've seen places in France that are 2,000 years old that are still standing. The building that I've been working on for a long time, Lincoln Cathedral, has elements in it that were begun in 1072. The majority of the building being from the 13th century. So as long as you care for these buildings over time and monitor them and keep an upkeep on them, they will last for a tremendous period, which is something concrete we know does not do.
Now, what would you say the barriers are to using more limestone in our country here in the United States?
The barriers are, as I said before, I think there's two parts. One is having enough people that know what to do with it and how to build with it, and the other one is people being willing to see it go up and willing to pay for the expense of it. Because obviously, in order to produce it, it takes more time than a cast concrete thing, which means you have to pay somebody a fairly, well, hopefully a decent amount of money to produce those things. So it is both cost and yeah, I mean, it's not a cheap thing to do. The advantage is the longevity of it and the ability to produce something that is a magnificent structure. That, I mean, I always think of it that there are two ways to think of it. If what you want is a quick and simple building that is only going to last for a short period, well, then you should make it out of concrete. If you want to make something that's a worthwhile structure that will add to the environment it sits in, that will be of a benefit to a community and have a lasting effect on a place, well, building a more traditional structure out of limestone or sandstone with lime and traditional practices, I can't think of a better way to build it. Really.
Now, what are the implications if we were to use more limestone to the workforce? Implications to the workforce.
That's a good question. You would start to need more highly skilled people to build with it, which would be, I mean, I suppose, especially if you look at the way things are right now, that can't be anything but good. I would think if we can train people that have skills that are going to last for a long time. That seems to me to be something that we really need to be doing, rather than trying to train people on skills that maybe don't have a longevity.
Sure. Now, what are some ideas you have for strengthening education and training?
Well, I would love to be able to find a place where I would love to teach masonry, teach the traditional craft of masonry. The problem, of course, is that if you're going to teach, you need to have some way to fit that into the existing academic structure. And there is nothing in the existing academic structure for a craft. So the only way that I can think about this is to try and think about making it be to teach conservation skills, the academic side of what it means to be a conservator, which is an accepted and existing academic field. But then also be training people who are craftspeople as well, to somehow try and combine the two so that you can produce students that when they graduate have an ability to walk in the world of academia, but also can walk in the world of a craftsperson and can span those things. Because at the moment there is a large divide between academic and management and professional people on one side, and the craftspeople have been almost relegated to tradespeople rather than possessing the crossover that they used to have. I mean, a couple hundred years ago, if you needed to build something, you went to a craftsman and you said, design this for me, make it for me. And that's not true anymore today.
Right. Now, this show is on STEM education. Can you give us some examples of math and science that is required to be a mason?
In order to be a competent, full-fledged mason that can do the whole thing, you need a bit of all of it. To understand the lime cycle and how to care for lime as it cures, and to understand how it functions, you need science. In order to understand what is happening to the deterioration of stone over time, you need to understand the science of what happens behind the stone. You need to understand the geology. In order to see how a building is functioning and understand how to support a building as you replace bits, engineering is essential. I mean, you don't have to become an engineer, but you need to understand the principles behind the engineering in order to understand how to take a stone out and put it back if it's in a precarious position. Maths come in having to do with being able to calculate ratio. I mean, ratios are an important one when dealing with lime, as it is with any kind of cement. There are wonderful calculations you can use in order to determine the volumes of stone by using simple maths. So it really needs a very full and well-rounded, educated person in order to produce people who really understand the full range of what it means to be a stonemason.
Now, how does that interact with architects, for example? Where's that line, or is there?
I don't really know in this country because I've only just moved home. But in the UK, there's always a bit of tension between architects, between the professional side, architects and engineers, and the stonemasons. Because as I said, you know, stonemasonry has become something that is viewed as a trade rather than a craft in many ways. And crafts in general have been relegated to people who just work with their hands, and it's all practical, and it's not something that requires the intellect anymore. So there can be real tensions with architects, where architects may not have any concept of what they're designing, and they simply say, oh, well, this would look amazing, I really want to do this. And you have to sort of say, well, you're crazy, that we can't do that. You know, unless we have to change everything, or we can't do that with stone. So it requires an architect and a stonemason that are willing and capable of communicating together in order to produce a really effective result. I mean, I saw that firsthand at the cathedral. Very, very fortunate to have the architect we did, because he saw his role not as one of mandating what should be done, but as trying to find a balance between what he could see and then taking the knowledge of the craftspeople that were there at the cathedral and integrating that into an overall plan. And when it works that way, it works really, really well. When it doesn't work that way, it does not work well, and there's constant headbutting and dilemmas about what the best way to do things is.
Right. It seems like a classical dilemma there. As far as competitions for students, are you aware of any out there that people participate in, or is it?
There are.
There are some?
There's a European skills competition every year, and England sends people, you know, England will have competitions among the schools and the apprentices, and then they compete on the European and the world scale. Every year for about the last 10, 12 years, there's been a European Stone Festival, and that includes both professionals and students competing. I say competing, it's a loose competition where winners will be voted on for what they produce over a couple of days, but it's a very friendly competition. It's not a cutthroat kind of thing. It's mainly a chance for people to get together and meet other people across Europe in the trade. And there are oftentimes other kinds of local competitions. At most of the colleges where they're training people in the UK, they'll have yearly competitions amongst people. So there is a competitive aspect in terms of those at the highest end of it.
Yeah. Now, participants from the United States,
Rare.
Did you know?
They're very rare.
Many?
Since I went over to the UK in 2000 to learn this, every year I've seen a couple of Americans come over and try this out. Some stay, some don't. I mean, I knew another guy from Canada who came, and he's working with a company up in Ottawa. It was a Scot. A guy, not a guy named Scott, but a Scotsman who emigrated to Canada, and he set up a very large company up there. And this guy, I know, he went and worked for them. So there are people coming over and learning this and coming back here. I haven't kept in touch with all of them, and I don't know what's happened with everybody. But
now, Canada, similar both the United States.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Although I think some of the connections, the continued connections to the UK, have meant that there are probably a few more companies there than here, because English masons have found it easier to emigrate to Canada than to the US.
Yeah, right. Now, what would some of the next steps be to create
That's a good
this
question.
resurgence?
There's a place called the American College of the Building Arts in Charleston, South Carolina, which has started doing something very similar to this, and they are offering undergraduate degrees in crafts. So they're offering stonemasonry and wrought iron work, plastering. I can't remember what the other courses they're offering are. So that's a really good place that started. There's another one in Savannah, Georgia, that is teaching a traditional conservation and production class in stained glass. So there are things that are going on out there, and I don't yet know what the right way forward is. Like I said, I've only just returned. So I'm hoping now to start making some contacts and talking to people and say, you know, I'm here, I'd love to do more, and find out what might be there. I mean, ideally, what it needs is somebody to throw a ton of money at it, and something could be begun.
That'd be nice.
But yeah, it would be nice. In the absence of that, I'm not sure where the place to start is.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a while for me to figure out what can be done, what people want done.
Now, what can people do? That, you know, the viewers out there, what can they do to help with this effort?
That's a very good question. And I'm not far enough along, I think, to understand that. I suppose the most important thing, though, I would hope, is that people maybe do a little research and try and understand what it means to build with lime, what the difference between concrete and hydraulic lime is, and what it means to build traditionally and to utilize things other than just cement. And to look around them at the structures that are here in Burlington. There are some wonderful buildings that are built of stone, marble, granite, sandstone. There's some wonderful things around, and to try and maybe think about what those buildings mean compared to some of the other buildings that are around. And the more people can appreciate and understand that, the more possibility there is that in the future people will start to be willing to pay a little bit more to see something that's a little different and that has those traditional elements in it.
Great, great. Well, Damon, I want to thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. My guest today was Damon Eyre, Mason and scholar. Damon talked about creating a resurgence of masonry in the United States. For more information about this show and related internet links and other shows in this series, go to retn.org and look for Masonry. Thank you for joining us.